freedom ring.
Good day, this is the Literate Patriot. In this podcast episode, we're going to discuss and compare the forum-style town hall hosted by CNN with the three Democratic presidential candidates on Monday the 25th of January 2016 and the Republican debate on Thursday the 28th of January 2016. And yet, in order to be able to discuss and compare these two events, we must first go back, way back. The Great Debates of 1858, also known as the Lincoln-Douglas Debates of 1858, were a testament to how divided the populace of Illinois, and indeed the nation, was on the issue of slavery. Abraham Lincoln and incumbent Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas responded to this divisive issue by ensuring the Illinois electorate had a chance to learn about how each candidate respectively felt on this nation-splitting issue. Lincoln and Douglas organized 7 debates to be held in the 7 of the 9 congressional districts of Illinois. The other 2 districts, either Lincoln or Douglas, visited within a day of their agreement, so they agreed not to visit those districts jointly. Most notable are 2 facts about the Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858. 1, the format, and 2, the press response of these debates. Now, in terms of the formats, one candidate spoke for 60 minutes. Then the other candidate spoke for 90 minutes. Finally, the candidate who spoke first was allowed a 30-minute rejoinder. Lincoln and Douglas alternated who went first to make the debates most fair. Now, as technology has progressed, candidates do not organize for such long and poignant speeches. Now, the debates have devolved into 60 to 30-second statements and responses, often with outright lies included therein, among petty statements and overblown rhetoric. In terms of the press coverage, not only were these debates heavily attended, the Great Debates of 1858 were heavily covered by the press. Realizing the debates would be of great import, the Illinois press sent transcribers to the debates and published the text in full. In a partisan press response that can still be seen today, even more clearly, some would say, papers favoring candidate Lincoln edited the text of the transcripts for error and grammar before publication, while leaving incumbent candidate Douglas's transcribed text as written. The same was also true for those papers that supported the pro-slavery and Negro subordination ideals of Stephen Douglas. Most do not realize that Abraham Lincoln, the man considered by many to be the greatest president in all United States history, lost the Illinois senatorial election. However, the texts circulated and were very much directly responsible for his nomination to the Republican ticket by the 1860 Republican National Convention in Chicago. President Abraham Lincoln may have lost the Illinois Senate election, but he had the opportunity to fully flesh out and debate ideas and policy with the incumbent Stephen Douglas. The Monday 25th of January 2016 forum-style town hall between Democratic presidential candidates Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley may boast the same, insofar as the political establishment and media systems may allow for such discourse. The forum, hosted by CNN and moderated by CNN's Chris Cuomo, gave the Iowa electorate and the nation an opportunity to speak and listen to the 3 Democratic presidential candidates. After the forum was over, the candidates overall could gleefully boast of any question asked during the forum asked and answered. Each candidate was on stage to be interviewed by the public for approximately 45 minutes, and within roughly 5 minutes of sitting down, the candidates were responding to questions and concerns of voters. In a time in the United States where an entire city has been poisoned by their government, a ragtag crew including Flint, Michigan's Governor Snyder and his direct appointees, forums where presidential candidates sit or stand in the case of most notably Governor O'Malley, to answer questions from the public is sadly, oddly refreshing. Now, largely absent from the forum-style town hall hosted by CNN was the discussion on foreign policy. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was given the opportunity to discuss foreign policy in a very detailed fashion, thanks to a question from an audience member. The other 2 presidential candidates Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former Governor of Maryland Martin O'Malley were not given the same opportunity. And this absence of a foreign policy discussion is a possible sign that Democrats are confident, or at least comfortable with, the foreign policy strategy outlined by President Obama. For example, on concerns like the Islamic State and the Levant, ISIL, and Syria, Democrats seem to recognize the inherent difficulties, are comfortable with the knowledge that they don't individually have the answer, and that the president and his administration are proceeding appropriately to eradicate ISIL and combat extremism. On the other side of the aisle, the Republican presidential debate on Thursday, the 28th of January 2016, foreign policy was a large issue in the discussion. Overall, the lackluster GOP debate was tiring even without the ravings of Republican presidential candidate and grown petulant child, Donald Trump. In the interest of maintaining ever-dwindling ratings, and in the interest of stifling intellectual discussion, the Republican Party forewent any idea of a forum-style discussion. Rather, the electorate was treated to 2 hours of insult-slinging and creative lies from rhetoricians and Ohio Governor John Kasich. As a reminder, while the Democratic presidential candidates sat down for approximately 45 minutes each, or we'll be fair and say with commercial breaks approximately 35 minutes each, to answer questions directly from the public and CNN's own Chris Cuomo, here are the speaking times for the Republican presidential candidates from the Republican debate hosted on Fox News Channel Thursday the 28th of January 2016. Florida Senator Marco Rubio spoke for 13 minutes 31 seconds. Texas Senator Ted Cruz spoke for 13 minutes 13 seconds. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush spoke for 9 minutes 24 seconds. Ohio Governor John Kasich spoke for 8 minutes 52 seconds. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie spoke for 8 minutes 22 seconds. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul spoke for 7 minutes 56 seconds. And last and least, retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson spoke for 6 minutes 11 seconds. These numbers are according to NPR. So out of a 2-hour debate, the longest speaking times of any of the candidates on stage was Florida Senator Marco Rubio at a staggering 13 minutes 31 seconds. That in comparison to the Democratic Forum, where candidates were on stage interacting with the electorate for a minimum of 35 minutes each, 35 minutes, to engage with the electorate, to discuss their ideas, with very few interruptions from the moderator, Chris Cuomo. In short, the events simply cannot be compared. While the Republican debate featured overblown rhetoric about how bad the past has been, in particular the past 8 years, a claim that is not consistent with reality, the Democratic Forum focused on the future. While the questions asked of the Republican presidential candidates were largely focused on foreign policy and were answered with, once again, insult-slinging and lies, the Democratic presidential candidates were asked questions one at a time, boasted probably only one negative, that the candidates were not able to respond to one another's answers, as was done in the Great Debates of 1858. Now, this is in the context of the other presidential candidates on the other side of the aisle, the Republican presidential candidates. And while the stage has dwindled, there's still about 7 of them, or really 8. There was Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, who was a massive mountain not in the room. Their messages seemed to just bleed together. It was very difficult to find ground on which the candidates were not common. While Libertarian Rand Paul was able to iterate his claim as the only fiscal conservative on stage, others like Ohio Governor John Kasich struggled to insert themselves into the dialogue or engage in demagoguery. That is what was occurring at the Republican presidential debate. And the Republican Party is in trouble. You see, because this is where the Republican Party is losing a lot of millennials, a lot of Generation Z, a lot of the younger generation that they're trying to reach out to, because when the Republican Party and when their lead candidates say things like the economy is the worst it's ever been, that families are struggling, they lose in particular millennials, but they lose Generation Z as well, because millennials watched their parents lose their homes during the financial crisis under President Bush. Millennials watched their families lose everything, having to leverage their 401k to pay down bills. millennials went off to college having to come to the realization that the college savings plan that their parents put together would not be good enough. And they've seen the economy completely turn around. They're watching their parents get on their feet again, just begin to get houses again, find stable employment again. Millennials, the last of them, are now graduating from college and being able to find stable work. Millennials were the recipients of some of the positive provisions in the Affordable Care Act that allowed millennials to stay on their parents' insurance until they were 26. And so when Republicans talk about how bad the economy has been, they lose a lot of credibility. They lose a lot of people in the younger generation who were willing to listen to the message, were willing to critically and analytically think and look at both sides of the argument before making up their mind. Because what the Republicans are trying to sell simply is not in reality. In the end, several conclusions become clear about the Democratic presidential candidates and the campaigns they've organized. No matter the criticism leveraged against some of the typical Clinton tactics, no attacks directed at either presidential candidate Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders or presidential candidate former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley could objectively compare with the insults and lies across the aisle. The two conclusions to take away are: one, the Democratic campaigns are overwhelmingly issue-focused, and two, the media hasn't really changed since 1858. That's the Literate Patriot review of the Democratic Forum-style town hall on Monday the 25th of January 2016 in comparison to the GOP debate on Thursday the 28th of January 2016. Please let me know your thoughts on this newly created podcast. Tweet the Literate Patriot at Literate Patriot. For extra content, subscribe to the Literate Patriot on YouTube by searching the Literate Patriot. Thank you.